When The Force Awakens first dropped, I didn't quite get into the insane hype. I mean, I understood what it was about, certainly, it's Star Wars. But Star Wars has never been my thing. I'm a fair weather fan, sure, but point is, wasn't in the thick of that fan base, and as such, when I watched it, I thought it was fine, but mostly a retread of the original Star Wars movie. And for quite a while now, it's felt like a lot of media has been nothing but crossovers and callbacks. Everything just references everything else. And after a while, everything just kinda feels like Smash Brothers. But the difference between me going into a new Star Wars movie as opposed to a new Spider-Man movie is I'm a much bigger Spider-Man fan. And right now, I don't give a shit. I loved this movie. For all the references, for all the callbacks, for all the fanfiction-y bits of dialogue that bring scenes to a screeching halt. And I love the Marvel banter. I love the long-needed closure and redemption. And I loved... well, there's just no way to talk about this movie without talking about spoilers, so buckle in, true believers. And I'm getting ahead of myself. Welcome to the Film Apologist, where we look for the good in bad movies. Yeah, alright, so No Way Home is no way a bad movie. I just wanted an excuse to talk about it. This was obviously meant to be a theater experience, baking in moments where audience reactions were expected. And of course, we are seeing pushback to that. But I find it a little ironic that we are now getting plenty of people complaining about cheering and clapping during a movie when cinema itself is something of an evolution to live theater. And while I only carry the most cursory knowledge of that particular history, I do know that audience participation has always been baked into these experiences in one form or the other. Not every single play, movie, or whatever, but it's always been there. And they've carried that over into different form or function over the years, be it interactive theater experiences with cheesy B-movie horror or live studio audiences and sitcoms. You can get as mad as you want about people clapping, and trust me, you can ask my friends, I am the biggest of curmudgeons. I hate when people randomly sing, and I'll be the first to tell somebody to shut up if they cannot stop talking during a movie. Yes, I've heard that people clap during plane landings. That's absolutely ridiculous. But bringing out a movie with the intent of getting people back into theaters could not be anything but an experience like this one. Yeah, I know we've had other movies in theaters before, but they weren't doing the numbers they were before the pandemic. And like a pandemic, the joy in my theater was infectious. This is fan service top to bottom, but I am a fan, so I enjoy being serviced. So yeah, sorry guys, I generally agree with people just shutting up and enjoying a movie, but not this time, man. It did indeed enhance the experience for me, and you'll be just fine. This thing will be on Disney Plus soon enough, and then you can watch it all quiet just the way you like it. But with all that said, once we are out of theaters and in our homes, will this movie still hold up? For me, I think so. But if you're not a huge Spidey fan, it might not. But then again, I don't know why you're watching that movie to begin with. I mean, there is a lot happening here, and it might seem cluttered if you've done nothing but watch the Holland films. But at the same time, Marvel has done a good job training their audience to expect a larger narrative from their bigger MCU franchise. Marvel now depends on this living, breathing world that they've built up over these past 10 plus years. This movie does have some meta narrative at play, which I'll dig into a little bit later, but I guess what I appreciate is that this doesn't treat its audience like idiots. It expects you to be aware of the MCU and, yeah, of other Spidey films, but at the same time, while it has all of this fan service, they are still doing their best to keep a cohesive narrative going through it on its own terms. They have characters interact with each other and kind of explain what their whole deal is, and in turn that explains it to the audience. And the story itself, thankfully, is easy enough to follow. In the last film, Mysterio outed Peter's identity, and in this one, immediately things go to shit, which I love. The instant the movie started, it was pure chaos, and that fits just fine with this version of Spider-Man. And yes, they do wipe away the frame for murder business pretty quickly. I have to admit, I'm perfectly fine with them throwing that out with a Daredevil cameo. Maybe that would have been a fun plotline if they weren't going to do what they ended up doing. I mean, you have to keep in mind this movie comes out after that short breakup between Marvel and Sony. But even that considered, it's not like the murder stuff does not serve a purpose. I don't really need to watch courtroom drama. I would assume that Spidey would be in the free and clear. Quentin Beck, I'm sure, has his fingerprints all over Stark's nonsense. You could trace it back and clear his name. I don't really need that story. But still, even being framed for murder will linger in the minds of the public. Spidey is one of the few characters in this world with a secret identity. And if he was just outed and nothing else, he'd be just another superhero at that point. And the MCU has made no qualms at showing us, especially recently, how society, and New York specifically, treats these guys like celebrities. But even if you've been found innocent in a murder trial, that claim leaves a lingering doubt. Enough of one that colleges don't exactly want the attention that would be brought on with having Peter Parker among their ranks, or anyone who associates with Peter Parker. That, of course, leads to Spider-Man and his amazing friends being denied every college application they put in. And feeling bad for what happened, he meets up with Doctor Strange to set things right. And it's as simple as it sounds. They do a spell to make everybody forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and they do kind of explain away some of the more questionable reasons why Doctor Strange would even consider doing this to begin with. It might not be enough for some people, but I was more than satisfied with this setup. You could make an argument here or there for this being somewhat out of character, but I thought it was fine. But yeah, they screw it up because Peter panics and keeps having Doctor Strange add people to the equation that won't forget that he's Spider-Man. That screws things up and instead turns the spell in on itself. So instead of making people forget that he is Spider-Man, it instead draws in people from other dimensions who know of his secret identity. But there's even a bit of a plot hole there, but we'll get to that later. It's an excuse to bring in villains from previous incarnations of the Spider-Man movie story. Act 2 spends a good amount of time introducing us to individual villains, and I gotta say, I'm very impressed with how they handled all of these introductions compared to the likes of Spidey 3. Sure, we don't have any origin stories to really worry about, but it's still a lot to tackle all at once, and letting each of these characters shine does take some effort. Thankfully, MCU movies have taken enough from source material, that being plenty of comic book crossovers up to this point, and they've got it down to a science. So bringing in all these colorful characters and letting them shine as individuals and giving them enough screen time to really stand out and be their own unique entity is quite impressive. They are different enough from each other in terms of personality and motivation. I really do think it works. And it's those fan service moments I mentioned that help bind the narrative together without dragging the pace down too much. Again, I can't speak for anybody who isn't quite as invested in the previous films, but hey, I'll leave that for their opinion pieces. Again, for me, I loved it. I was actually more worried that they would bring in all these characters more for spectacle over the substance. And for me, and I'm sure for plenty of others, I was just as excited to see them talk with each other as I was to see them fight Spider-Man. And I'm not gonna pretend that I didn't enjoy the movie taking the time to let those interactions happen. I mean, yes, it is silly having all of these villains sneak into Happy Hogan's apartment and then come across a magical Stark box that builds anything you want, but still this scene really humanizes all these guys, which I feel is a very important part for Spider-Man and his rogues. I know people get sick and tired of how quippy Marvel movies can be, but if anybody's gonna be quippy, I would like it to be Spider-Man, and the fish out of water confusion between some of these guys was cute. It worked for me. I said it on a spoiler cast with the Sunset City crew, but I compared this to that obnoxious mac and cheese scene from the latest episode of Hawkeye, which dragged on forever and just drove me crazy. There is a little bit of that here, but I don't know, maybe it's because I'm invested in the previous movies, but the banter between everybody was great, especially in the third act, which we'll get to in a little bit. The only rogue that felt completely different from a previous iteration was Electro, and I would be surprised if that was more Jamie Foxx's doing, you know, because who wants to be a cartoon nerd? Couldn't blame the guy if that's the case. They at least try to explain in a throwaway line why he's changed, and that's fine with me. I honestly prefer this take on the character. And it's clear Jamie Foxx does as well. And his motivation makes sense. He likes who he has become, and he's literally made out of power. Of course he wants to have more of it. Lizard didn't have much to do, and his CG design still isn't doing it for me, but I still found him quite enjoyable. Not somebody I thought I'd miss, but like Electro, I'm glad to see him here. I thought it was a little bit weird that he was just going along with the plans in motion, especially since they blatantly said he likes being a lizard and he wants to turn other people into lizards. But they make it clear he's only following along for his own benefit. He was just waiting for shit to hit the fan as he predicted, and sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And Sandman is a character I've more associated with the Sinister Six than I've ever done as a standalone villain, more like a follower than a leader. He's not given a lot to do here, but I don't feel like they portrayed who he was in Spider-Man 3. Yeah, I know he says sorry at the end of the movie, but I don't think that's enough to completely turn him away from his less than savory behaviors. He did not turn bad because he was made out of sand. He was a criminal before that point. point. And he still has a short temper and he's very distrusting. So I can see why he would fight this version of Spider-Man. It's more of a lack of faith in Peter's ability to cure them than anything else. The two villains who get the most attention are the most deserving of it, yet both are handled in ways I didn't actually expect, and I'm glad to be proven wrong. Doc Ock was the first to show up on the scene, and I loved that fight. And that's really all I needed in terms of the action side of things for this character. I'm glad we spent the rest of the time with him on screen, engaging him on a personal level, allowing us to see that there are other ways to deal with villains instead of just killing them. In so many Spidey plots, something else kills the villain, so Spidey's hands are free of blood, and also the problem has just taken care of itself. It's too easy of a solution most of the time for me. And this movie is all about doing things the right way instead of the easy way. Doc Ock being cured satisfies a what-if scenario that's played out in fans' minds for almost 2 decades, and probably some other characters that we'll see a little bit later. And that also juxtaposes wonderfully against Dafoe's opinion on the matter. And yeah, without surprise, Willem Dafoe once again shows us that he is a man who loves his job. I'll talk about it a little bit more when I talk about the first Spidey movie game, which coming soon, but I've never seen him in any role, no matter how small, without feeling like this dude is giving us his all. It feels like he loves acting. And yeah, it shows here as well. I've heard this crazy old man even wanted to perform his own stunts in this movie. And yeah, the Goblin once again steals the show. And I'm gonna admit to you right now, I am a fan of that questionable movie costume from back in 2002, but I do like this ragged makeshift look, falling a lot more in line with the original comic book version. I do think it's a little weird having a regular human face under that hood, but if it's gotta be anyone's face, I'm glad it's Dafoe's. I've often said if they really wanted to make this guy terrifying in that original movie, they should have just dunked his naked ass in green paint and let him go wild. I guess this is a nice in-between. It is great to actually see him emote, so a win all around. And I loved the fight between Spidey and Goblin that took place in the apartment complex. Honestly, I loved all of the fights leading up to this point. All of them require Spider-Man to use his brains in a different capacity from each fight. He overpowers Doc Ock's tentacles with the nanobots from his suit. He does get help from Sandman against Electro, but this does show us that he does have some practice with delegation and working with others, which apparently does become important later. And him using math to screw up Doctor Strange was fantastic. I've been fine with this klutzier, hectic Spider-Man from the other 2 MCU movies, and seeing him grow more into the role has been very satisfying, and it shows me that Tom Holland really takes this character seriously and really gets him, because the quippier he gets, the more confident he is in his own abilities, the more it feels like Spider-Man, and I loved seeing that slow progression in these last few movies, and that really shined through to me in that fight with Strange. But he still has some more growing to do, as we do see from the movie, and the scene that follows the fight with Goblin specifically, because man, Aunt May's death was that was rough. They call back to that original Goblin stab, something that Green Goblin is now aware of because he was told that's how he dies. So instead of setting off Peter's spider sense, which they show time and again is a very important part of this movie, and instead of pointing the glider at Spider-Man, he shoots it off at May. I'm assuming that's why it didn't set off his spider sense, or at least didn't let him react with enough time. I don't really know. I do have some problems with the spider sense, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But as death scenes go, this one got to me. We've had time to get to know this character, and they string us along enough to make us feel like it might end up being okay. Having her get back up, and while shaky, she is walking about, so hopefully she'll be fine. But all the while, the music and the tone still telling us that we're not out of danger yet. And even May, who says she's doing just fine, can tell that there is something off. And when Peter expresses regret for bringing these guys in and putting her in harm's way, she has no other care in the world than to make sure that Peter knows a very important lesson and imparts the most important words in his life. With great power must also come great responsibility. They spent so much time with these movies trying not to tire people out with the same old, but it's been a long time since we've heard it. And even here, we are still left in the dark as to whether or not this was something Uncle Ben has passed on to Peter. as Spidey pauses, soaks in the words, and responds with, "I know." And this could be either a natural reaction to what May just said, or he does literally know, like this is a mantra that Ben lived by, and it's something that Peter and May are aware of. We don't know. They very cleverly skirted around the Uncle Ben talk quite a few times in this movie. Whatever the case is, for this story, for this interpretation of the character, you can kind of see why this Spider-Man would be a little more reckless, a little more lighthearted. A Spider-Man who got to meet Iron Man and hang out with the Avengers. One who has screwed up a lot, but never has actually been responsible for the death of one of his loved ones. Yeah, they kind of retroactively make sense of many of the criticisms some Spider-Man fans have had about the MCU version of the character. I've always been fine with it. We've had plenty of other Spider-Man up to this point, and he's way too popular of a character. I know he's always going to be in film in some form or function now. So I've been happy with Tom Holland's version being like the Marvel team-up version of the character. It was something different, yet still true enough to the character. I had a great time with it. Regardless, that all changes in this moment with Aunt May's death, and Goblin makes it clear to Peter that no matter what way you cut it, Spidey is the reason all these villains are here, and in turn, why May is dead. Peter had the easy solution in his hand the whole time, and he fought against using it. And if he had just clicked that button, May would still be here. They have goofy moments, and they have these deeply sad moments, and it never feels completely out of place. And I think people underplay these really serious moments in this trilogy, and I think they've earned it every single time. But yeah, that is the first two acts of the movie, and while it's already a wild juggling act, we still have a couple more balls to throw in the mix. They switch over to Ned and MJ, who have been told to get somewhere safe, and I do have to say, I do love Ned and MJ. Happy Hogan, whatever about, it's always nice to see him, but I don't know, I don't really need him in these movies. But yeah, MJ and Peter's relationship feels real. I felt Ned might have been downplayed a little bit compared to the last two movies, but he still does get a very important plot point. And they do kind of say he's magically inclined, and I'm sure his owl will be arriving any day now, but they use this here as an easy excuse to bring in the two worst secrets kept in cinema history, and that is Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire. As if there was any doubt these two were gonna show up. Disney and Sony weren't gonna go to all this effort of bringing in all these old baddies without bringing in the Spider Bros. Come on, guys. God, man, it was so great. The opening of the portal, that tease of a Spider-Man in the distance, it looks like Tom's, but no, not quite, is it? It's a little different. Then as he comes closer to the camera, cuts away, cuts back, and he's leaping through the portal to reveal Andrew Garfield. Oh my god, man, I don't care. If your theater did not erupt, y'all did it wrong. Again, I don't normally like talking during flicks either, but again, it's not the same thing, and you crusty, cranky bitches know it. That was a great experience, and it was fun, and I was glad everybody else felt the same way I did seeing him there on the screen. And I gotta tell you, I don't really like the Amazing Spider-Man films, but I sure as hell love elements of them, and Garfield certainly was a standout. He fits in so well here, not just in the MCU, but just as Spider-Man. And I'm sure you're gonna be seeing that particular opinion everywhere. I can't imagine how good that must have felt for actual Amazing Spider-Man fans, finally getting that recognition. And yeah, man, I'm sorry, those movies really let him down. He is so good, and you can tell he just loves it. It's so awesome. Those movies were shit on so bad, but now you have people across the world screaming in excitement at his return. Man, that's good feels all around, man. And of course, without even needing a costume, Tobey Maguire walking onto the scene gave just as big of a reaction. At first, I got the impression that maybe he didn't want to be there since he wasn't in costume, but the more I think about it, Tobey's Peter juxtaposed nicely against Andrew and Tom's take of the character. He has always been a quieter, downplayed version of Peter Parker, and that wasn't exactly gonna change with age. He is a grown-up, confident Spider-Man, not this comically cynical one we saw in the Spider-Verse. It's still the character we've come to know and love from the Raimi films, just he's lived a little more life. And man, I can't tell you how much I love that they just showed up in the middle of a living room. I keep telling you, I love the stupid quips. I love seeing Amazing Peter try to take in all the crazy science happening with all the... It's just... I love those little moments, and I didn't think we were going to get any of those. I fully expected these two to just pop up during the final fight and then say, well, bye, which is kind of what happened in Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions. That's the only time the Ultimates version of Peter Parker and 616 Peter Parker have ever met up. And even then, fans will contest how canon that is. But here, they fully embrace all these interactions, and I, again, am here for it. This big-ass event film has them show up in a living room where an old woman is basically like, who gives a shit? I'm going to bed. You kids don't make too much damn noise. And they first meet MCU Spidey during the darkest moment of his life. Peter Parker is meeting alternate reality versions of himself. He was blown away that the multiverse turned out to be real at the beginning of this very movie. This is a huge moment for him as a character and for us as comic book movie fans. And he could not begin to give a shit. He does not care that these guys are here. He does not care about being the better man. His life has been crashing down around him, and all he's ever tried to do is the right thing. And all of that cost him his mother. And what's great is these two guys get it. They talk about these horrific losses in their own lives and how they've tried to deal with it. And they still don't confirm that Uncle Ben exists in this universe. But Andrew Spidey talks about becoming angrier, holding back less in fights. And Toby's Peter Parker connects with Tom's Peter Parker with the great power, great responsibility line, showing that, yeah, while they have lived different lives, they all still follow that same mantra. At their core, all three of them are Spider-Man. This scene matters so much to me because it shows me that the filmmakers understand why the character of Spider-Man matters so much. And having these three in costume together fighting bad guys was always going to be cool, and it would have been so easy to just have them drop in and do just that. But they don't meet each other first as Spider-Man. They meet each other first as Peter Parker. Yes, anyone can wear the mask, but we have grown to give a damn about the people behind these three masks, and having them come together to help out a younger, broken version of themselves. Have this out-of-body experience, watching basically their past play out from an outsider's perspective. Having this chance to maybe not set everything right in their own lives, but do their best to make sure that this one maybe can go down a better path. That meant the world to me. And even before the last big battle, we see all three of them first be scientists before they're superheroes, using past experience with these bad guys and each other's intelligence to figure out formulas to cure every bad guy out there. And I do appreciate they actually go out of their way to make one for each villain. They don't just make one concoction that works on everybody. I do love that they actually go out of the way to show some of these concoctions actually match up with what they had in previous movies. And these small interactions and jokes actually double as references to some of the villains that weren't going to make an appearance in this film. Sorry, Topher. These three play off each other so well. Andrew and Tom go a bit bigger and comical with their performances, and it's played off well against the cooler, calmer Toby, who really does feel like an older brother in this wacky scenario. And I love that that's actually a line from Andrew Garfield's character later on. Yes, they're here to help MCU Spidey, but as we see throughout the final fight, they all need each other in some way. They are technically variations of the same person, but different enough that they do indeed feel like brothers. And that's clearly something Amazing Spidey yearned for. And that easily predicted redemption of saving MJ. Yeah, it's an easy win for this flick. There are a lot of those, but god damn it, I am so happy they went for it. It really felt like, well, this is probably the only chance we're gonna do anything like this, so let's just do it now. And again, they talk about all of this during these conversations. Every little thing is important in this movie, as goofy as it can be. It still works on its own terms. It definitely works way better if you've seen the other movies, but still, man, like, they're doing a lot here. And of course, the final fight is so much stupid fun. I'm gonna rewatch this so many times. And it is a nice callback to Spidey 3. I gotta admit, this movie is gonna make me go back to all the Spider-Man movies I wasn't a big fan of and look at them in a little different light. If you want me to actually check those out on this channel, let me know, because I'm definitely going to be watching them either way. But yeah, not only is it a callback in terms of a construction site, but I think this might be the only time Tobey's Spider-Man teamed up with anybody, that being New Goblin, which is definitely a standout moment in that third flick. Again, they do bring things to a screeching halt on occasion when they have like Tobey and Ock chat it up, or have all three Spider-Men bicker on strategy, but I'm here for it. You probably heard us mention this on the spoiler cast, but Electro not knowing Spidey's identity is a bit of a plot hole. I think Wayne made a good enough excuse for it. I think this is one of those situations where while they go and over-explain a lot of stuff in this movie, I think they were kind of hoping nobody was really gonna notice or it wouldn't detract too much away from the overall enjoyment. Of course, they try to distract us with a reference to Miles Morales, and hey, that worked for me. Maybe it's bad pacing, but I'm watching this movie for a very specific reason. So when the fights stop in order to have older spiders interact with these villains was everything I would ever want. Giving these versions of Peter Parker a chance at closure and redemption in small ways, all while wrapping up particular narratives that they had been building through this story for these villains. These versions of Peter Parker, as late as they were to show up to this party, are given a second chance to give these wayward souls a second chance. It's awesome. And finally, of course, Goblin comes in to get into it with the boys, leading to a final beatdown between him and MCU Peter, who beats his ass into submission and then lifts the Goblin glider over his head to deliver a final blow. And you know what? They went for it, and I was quite happy that they did. I fully expected them to pull out some tired tropes, like Andrew is gonna come out to stop Tom, but Tobey puts his hand up and is like, wait, this is his battle, even though it's my Goblin. And then Tom brings up the glider, but brings it crashing down next to Norman's face because he just couldn't do it. But nope, they don't have any of that nonsense. This piece of garbage just killed his mother, and he then has the gall to come back and mock him. MCU Peter brings that thing down with every intention of ending that dude. And I'm sorry, I know it's not the most superhero-y thing to do, but holy crap, he is just human. And that's about as justified as you're gonna get. He's still a young kid, he's still broken, he's still upset, he's still angry. And look, if you have a problem with this, but you don't have a problem with Superman snapping Zod's neck in Man of Steel, spoiler for Man of Steel, then I don't want to hear it. I just don't want to hear it. This version of Peter has shown time and again that he has a problem of leaping first without thinking. This is potentially a Peter that did not learn the lesson of great power, great responsibility prior to that point. Yes, May just said it, but every other version of Spider-Man went after Uncle Ben's killer with the intent to kill them. And I love that it's Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man who comes in to save his version of Norman Osborn. And he's not doing it for the sake of Norman. He knows how evil this dude can be. He knows how dangerous this guy is. Way better than anybody else here. He's the one that stops MCU Spidey from going through with it. And while I did mention going back in time to fix a mistake, that's not something they can technically do. In some figurative way, this is Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man going back in time and stopping a younger version from reacting in the moment, reacting in blind rage and pain. He's stopping him from doing something he will regret for the rest of his life. I'm sorry, I like the occasional flaw from Peter Parker, and I like that he immediately learns that lesson. He knows he's got to be better, because immediately after that, Goblin, being the piece of trash he is, goes in and stabs Tobey's Peter Parker, giving MCU Spidey another reason to take this guy out. But instead of lobbing off his head, he grabs the formula and makes the right move. Man, there's just a lot to pick apart in that one scene, and it deserves so much more than, well, that's just not what superheroes do. I do have to say, though, they spent so much time talking about the spider sense in this movie, yet Goblin was able to blindside Tobey's Spidey and just stab him. Again, if you heard the spoiler cast, I could kind of wave it off like Tobey understands what it means to sacrifice and felt it was more important to save MCU Spidey's humanity, blah, 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 blah. You could explain it away, I suppose, but that stood out to me. After that, Peter has to make a huge call because, and I didn't mention this earlier, Goblin blew up this little box I was holding the spell together, so now the dimensions are starting to split apart and every villain that knows who Spider-Man is about to pop on in. So to stop it, Peter tells Doctor Strange to complete the original spell, and it goes to a whole other extreme. Instead of just forgetting the connection between Spider-Man and Peter Parker, the entire world forgets who Peter Parker is. And can I just say not only was it a ballsy move to reference one of the most hated Spider-Man stories from the comics, that being One More Day, they actually go and take it a step further. It really is a monkey paw situation because Peter loses everything. He has literally zero connections in this new world. He has nobody he can turn to this time. Iron Man's gone. Aunt May is gone. People literally do not know he exists. He can't just hang out in Avengers bunkers or anything like that. He's in a worse point than I think any of the other Spider-Men have been in. And he makes that call. He makes that sacrifice. After everything that's happened to him, even faltering in that last moment there, he has learned these lessons at a very heavy cost, but it was his call. He fully takes responsibility, going so far as to not bother MJ or Ned after they forget who he is, because he sees what kind of pain he has caused them just by being in their lives, and he's not about to repeat that mistake, regardless of what MJ told him to do. And man, oh man. Zendaya and Tom Holland, they're great. These kids are great. Man, they're good at their jobs. This movie acts as a celebration. It acts as a mending tool for this busted up fan base. It acts as a fresh reboot for Peter Parker. And yes, that comic accurate suit at the end of the movie was glorious. It works for me on so many levels as a fan of the previous movies, as a fan of the character. It's one of my favorite Spider-Man movies ever made. I think I like Spider-Verse better just because I forgot it's Spider-Verse, for God's sakes. But even then, like the bigger focus on the crossover portion of things, because like, let's be real, who really needed that anime girl in Spider-Verse? Do you even remember her? I sure as hell didn't. Yes, they're both crossover movies, but they're both doing different things. And I am excited for the Spider-Verse sequels, not so much to see other Spider-Man, but just to see more of Miles' story. I just like that rendition of the character. It's great on its own terms. Animation's beautiful, all that stuff. This can only happen once, though. As much as I love this, I've lived through Star Wars. I've lived through Jurassic Park. I lived through Sonic Generations going into Sonic Forces. Do not do this again. It could only work once. We got a bunch of closure for all these characters. If you want Andrew Garfield doing a different Spider-Man thing, I will watch it. But for a big, grand Spider-Man crossover event, I really think this can only work the one time. So yeah, I think it's gonna hold up. And even if they do make a stupid sequel with all this shit again that doesn't hold up as well, this will still hold up on its own terms, but just don't ruin the fun. Take it from me as a classic Sonic fan. Cameos wear out their welcomes. Oh, and I do have to mention, I did love that they ended the movie with a classic Spider-Man suit, only to then tease yet another suit after all of that. Yeah, the mid-credit scene showed Tom Hardy's version of Venom still hanging out at that bar that he was at the end of Venom 2. And then they're recapping everything that's happened in the MCU, which I know seems a bit tired. They actually went and did that exact same thing. Actually, that's a little bit clever now I'm thinking about it, because the first time they were kind of recapping, Purple Alien and all this other stuff, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man had mentioned the black alien goo monster, which, was Venom. And then when we actually get to see a different version of Venom, he's talking about the big purple alien again. Only to then immediately be whisked away back to his own universe, leaving behind a little bit of the symbiote. And I've seen people completely lose their minds about this. Like, I can't believe they did that just to send him back. And I just have to ask, what makes you guys think that Tom Hardy's character is not gonna come back to the MCU? Or Tom Holland's Spider-Man isn't gonna go to Venom's universe? It's likely gonna be Venom coming back to the MCU. They had him recap what had happened in that universe for a reason. They left behind a little bit of the symbiote for a reason. They aren't doing all of this just to give you a different Eddie Brock. That's not what's gonna happen. What's going to happen is that little symbiote bit is going to act as a homing beacon, and for some rhyme or reason, and it'll be a stupid simple reason like it was for this movie, they will bring in Tom Hardy's character back into this universe. Maybe they'll have MJ remember who Peter is, and that causes a quick rupture. Or maybe since they are now considered a multi-dimensional being, the symbiote will just call out to the other one and then it'll transport over. It doesn't matter. It's going to be those two versions of the character meeting up. I promise you. But more importantly than that, Marvel, do not fuck up my black suit. Do not do it. I know some of you guys like the Spider-Man 3 black suit. suit, and yeah, it's a black version of a dope suit. I've come to terms with it. That's fine. I don't need it again. Give me the black suit. You're gonna give me comic accurate red and blues, give me comic accurate black and white. I don't care what the excuses were for Spider-Man 3. Make it a gimp suit. Make it sexy as shit. Give me my black suit. Oh, you know what? Actually, that's also probably gonna mean we're gonna get symbiote Spider-Man versus Venom. That's gonna be awesome. I'm so glad they didn't cram in Eddie Brock into this movie. I'm glad it was just a tease. I'm glad they're actually gonna blow up Spider-Man versus Venom into a bigger thing. Because yeah, I'm a 90s baby. I love the Dark Mirror version of characters. Those are some of my favorite villains, easy as they may be. And now we have a Peter Parker who, yeah, is trying to do the right thing, but it's cost him literally everything. And he's in a very deep, dark place in his life right now. And this little symbiote is probably gonna feed off of that. And since it's only a little bit of it, it's not gonna have the full on Eddie voice like the other one does, you know? It makes everything work. I'm so excited. I'm so happy. You guys need to quit moping about that. They're going to have a movie together. That is going to happen. As for the Doctor Strange trailer, who gives a shit? Who actually gives a shit? I'm sorry. The movie's gonna be fun. I have no problem with that, but I'm only mentioning because I thought it was cute that at the end of a Spider-Man movie, they tease a Sam Raimi movie, which, that's cute, right? That's cute. But yeah, I just kind of broke down everything that happened in the movie, detailing what I liked about it, and it's not a whole lot I didn't like. It's more just little bits and pieces that can technically, I guess, maybe sort of be explained away, but at the end of the day, whatever it means for the wider world of cinema, whatever it means for the wider world of the MCU, or what this movie means as its own movie, I loved this. Fan service and all. I would not have liked it as much without all of this fan service. I'm excited to see more Spider-Man and my black suit and Venom. Man, it's been such a long time since I gave a crap about anything in a movie theater. Yeah, I'm sorry. I am including Sonic the Hedgehog there. It was nice to see a character I love on the big screen. Movie didn't really do much for me. It's just a fun little family flick. I usually just go to a movie, I experience it, and I'm like, well, that's it. I'm done. But here I was cheering with everybody else. I had a big grin on my face from start to finish. I don't care if this played me like a fiddle. It did the job I wanted it to do. And I'm not gonna pretend I'm above that, because I'm not. I love this. I am genuinely curious to hear people pick it apart. Don't get me wrong. I love those deep analysis. But yeah, I'm just rambling now. The script has long since been over. So thank you for sticking around and just letting me gush. I've been wanting to just... Like, I already did a spoiler cast with my friends over at Sunset City, so if you want to hear how I kind of helped formulate some of these thoughts, go listen to that conversation. It is still a lot of fun. I do repeat a couple points here and there, but hearing from Pup, hearing from Cirrus, hearing from Wayne, it was a great conversation, and hearing their perspectives was a lot of fun. Be sure to check out Sunset City if you haven't already. It's a weekly podcast I do all about Sonic the Hedgehog with these fine folks. And be sure to check out Channel Pup as well. He actually has already done a couple of videos pertaining to his thoughts on this movie, and seeing those opinions evolve as he takes more of it in and really stews it over. It's a lot of fun. He's a great guy if you want to take in any kind of Spider-Man content. Same with Wayne. He's already covered all the Spidey games, which I'm about to get into, and he's really, really undersubbed. He really deserves more love. So please do me the favor of going and checking those boys out. It would mean the world to me. Usually ask for jumping on Patreon or some other nonsense like that. If you guys could instead just go check out some other content creators. If you haven't already, they're awesome. And they got plenty of Spidey content for you. Cirrus has stuff too, but he doesn't talk about Spider-Man, so who gives a shit? Anyway, I want to say thank you to all the patrons who've been helping me out with this show. And an extra special thanks to these fine folks here who paid a little bit extra just so they could hear me ramble out their name. So thank you guys. This means a lot to me. And that includes Kyle Winter, Cirrus the right, Cirrus is here. Oh, that's awkward. Joseph Duncan, Sonic 2 Blue, John, Spider Moore, Faizan Razul, Xanderondi the Painter, Trey Nobles, Hatsworth, Nick S, Tristan Trapp, Meekers, Dun Dun, Miles the Prower, Jeremy Singer, Mr. Boo J, Rain, Sam Webster, Dwight Graham, Fish Flop, Lucas Lipker, The Bad Pal, Shoden, Mr. SP, Cecil the Glade, The Dark Neon, Missy No, Stefan Plakanica, 3 Monic,
Nick, Graham J. Hall, Leonard X, Wayne is Boss, Jamie Chevalier, Letterick, 64 Bits, Bathsheba's New Hubba Bubba 20 Covers, Ryan Rolfs, The Lumberjack, Otis Small, Shifting Flesh, Mute, Trash Baphomet, Autumn from Twitter.com, and Andrew T. Fulchetti. I'm still not entirely sure why you guys fund these insane little rambling projects, but I'm not about to complain. Thank you guys so much for all of your support. And yes, if you're usually here for the Sonic stuff, don't worry, that's always on the back burner. We'll have something soon, I promise you. But we also gotta cover some of these movie Spider-Man games, just got an itching for them. And I promised patrons we'd be covering Psychonauts and got some other stuff I've worked on with a couple other folks we gotta get out the door. Just a lot of fun stuff for 2022, so I'm really excited to show you what I got. But until next time, toot toot, Web Warriors.